Crash landing. David gasped for air as the shattered remains of his spacecraft, the Voyager, groaned and settled into the dense underbrush of an alien forest. Sparks fizzled from exposed wires, casting eerie shadows around the cockpit. His head throbbed, and his vision blurred, but he knew he had to move. He unbuckled his safety harness with trembling hands, feeling the bite of sharp pain in his side. "Come on, David. You've survived worse," he muttered to himself, pushing the cockpit door open with a forceful kick. The air outside was thick and humid, filled with the scent of unknown flora. The trees towered high, their canopies forming a vibrant, green ceiling that barely let any sunlight through. He stumbled out, leaning against the hull of his craft, and surveyed the desolation around him. "Is anyone else out there? Can anyone hear me?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the dense woods. No response came, only the distant call of alien fauna and the rustle of leaves. Pulling out his emergency beacon, he tried to send a distress signal, but the screen blinked out, damaged beyond repair. "That's just great," he groaned, sliding down the hull to sit on the moist earth. He needed to assess his injuries. Pulling up his sleeve, he winced at the sight of the deep laceration on his arm. He ripped a strip from his uniform and tied it around the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. As he worked, a soft rustling approached. He froze, then slowly reached for the survival knife at his belt. A tall, shadowy figure emerged from the trees, pausing just at the edge of the clearing. It stood upright, at least 12 feet tall, with smooth, silvery skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light that filtered through the canopy. "Who are you?" David called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The figure tilted its head, studying him, then took a step closer. Its movements were graceful, almost cautious. David noticed that it had 4 arms, each ending in slender, dexterous fingers. "I mean no harm," the figure spoke, its voice a deep, melodic rumble that resonated through the quiet forest. "I am Kayla of the Yorathi. You are not from this world." David lowered his knife slightly, his curiosity piqued despite the situation. "No, I'm not. I'm David, from Earth. My ship crashed. I'm not sure how badly I'm hurt." Kayla moved closer, her height casting a long shadow over him. "Your vessel is beyond repair," she observed, her upper hands gesturing to the wreckage. "And you are injured. My village is nearby. We can treat your wounds there." David hesitated, weighing his limited options. Alone, injured and stranded, trusting this alien might be his only chance. He nodded slowly. "Okay, lead the way, Kayla." She offered one of her lower hands to him. He took it, surprised by the warmth of her touch. With her support, he rose to his feet, grimacing as pain shot through his body. "Easy," Kayla cautioned, her tone gentle. "We will go slowly." As they walked, David glanced up at Kayla, taking in her peculiar yet striking features. Eyes wide and luminous, a soft blue glow emanating from beneath her skin, and her movements exuding a calm assurance. "Thank you, Kayla, for helping a stranger." "It is our way," she replied, leading him deeper into the forest. "You would do the same, wouldn't you?" "I would," he agreed, the forest around them alive with the sounds of a world yet to be explored. Chapter 2. First Encounter. The dense underbrush of the alien forest gave way to a clearer path as David limped alongside Kayla, relying heavily on her steady support. Every step was a mixture of pain and wonder, as his eyes took in the vibrant flora that seemed to pulse with an inner light, illuminating their path even in the dimness. "You live in this forest?" David asked, his voice laced with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "Yes, my village is just ahead. We are part of the forest, as it is part of us," Kayla explained, her voice echoing softly around them. The path began to widen, and soon they emerged into a clearing where structures made from the same glowing material as the trees were woven together in an intricate pattern. The sight was breathtaking, architecture perfectly in harmony with nature. People, or rather beings like Kayla, stopped to stare as they entered. They were tall like her, with the same shimmering skin, but varied in the luminescent hues that seemed to underlie their surface. "Is he the one from the sky crash?" A younger Yorathi approached, his tone laced with excitement rather than fear. "Yes, Ivar, this is David," Kayla introduced. "He's hurt, and I'm taking him to the healers." Ivar looked David over with wide, curious eyes. "I've never seen a human before." "Welcome to Yora," he said, extending a hand in friendship. David shook it, smiling despite his discomfort. "Thank you, Ivar. It's quite the place you have here." They continued through the village, and David was struck by the sense of community and the ease with which Kayla interacted with her fellow villagers. They reached a larger building, its doors open, revealing a warm, softly lit interior. "This is where our healer, Male, practices. He'll take care of you," Kayla said as they entered. Inside, the air was cool and filled with a sweet, calming aroma. An elderly Yorathi, who David assumed was Male, came forward. His gaze was keen and penetrating, yet there was a gentleness to his approach. "Kayla tells me you've suffered in your crash. Let me see what we can do for you," Male said, guiding David to a reclined seat that seemed to mold itself to his form as he sat. As Male examined his wounds, Kayla explained what had happened. "His ship fell from the sky during the last storm cycle. It's completely destroyed." Male applied a cool, gel-like substance to David's cuts. "You're fortunate, young man. The forest is not kind to intruders, but it seems you've found a friend in Kayla." David chuckled weakly. "Yeah, I guess I am lucky." The healer worked silently for a few moments before speaking again. "Your injuries are not grievous, but you need rest and time to heal. Kayla, can he stay in your dwelling?" Kayla nodded. "Of course. He will be safe with me." Male seemed pleased with her response. "Good. Rest, and let the forest's energy aid your recovery. You are welcome here, David." As Male finished up, Kayla helped David to his feet. "Let's get you settled in. You can rest, and later, I'll show you around the village." David leaned on her as they walked back to her home, a small but cozy place nestled among the towering trees. "Thank you, Kayla, for everything." "It's the least I could do," she replied. "After all, it's not every day we get visitors from another world." Settling into a comfortable resting area, David felt a profound gratitude for the kindness of these strangers, and a growing fascination with their unique culture and Kayla's quiet strength. As he drifted off to sleep, his thoughts lingered on the possibilities that lay ahead, not just for recovery, but for understanding this beautiful alien world and its inhabitants. Chapter 3. Sheltered. David awoke to the gentle sounds of the Yorathi forest. The light filtering through the bioluminescent leaves bathed Kayla's dwelling in a soothing glow. He felt surprisingly refreshed, the pain in his side now a dull ache. Kayla was already up, moving quietly around the space which served both as her home and as a community meeting spot. "Good morning, David. How do you feel?" Kayla asked, her voice calm and comforting. "Much better, thanks to your healer," David replied, trying to sit up. Kayla noticed his struggle and quickly came to assist him. "Take it easy. Healing is still in process," she advised, helping him to a sitting position. David looked around, noticing the intricate details of the home for the first time. "This place. It's incredible. How is it made?" Kayla smiled, pleased by his interest. "We grow our homes here from the living trees. It's a process of shaping and guiding the growth over many years. It makes them part of the forest. As they talked, there was a knock at the structure's organic door. Kayla opened it to reveal a tall, sturdy Yorathi male, his skin a deep shade of green. "Ah, Tauren." Kayla greeted him warmly. "David, this is Tauren, our community leader." Tauren stepped inside, nodding at David with a smile. "I heard we had a visitor from beyond the stars. How are you settling in, David?" "Thanks to Kayla, very well," David responded, extending his hand. Tauren took it, his grip firm and friendly. "I'm glad to hear that. Your arrival has been quite the event for us." "It's not every cycle we get to meet someone from another world," Tauren said, his tone both serious and light. "Kayla tells me you're interested in our ways." "I am," David confirmed. "It's all so different from Earth. Even the way you build. Would you like to see how we do it?" "It's about time for the young saplings to be shaped," Tauren offered. David looked to Kayla, who nodded encouragingly. "That sounds amazing, yes." Tauren led them outside, and they walked to a nearby area where young trees were beginning to form the basis of a new structure. Several Yorathi were already at work, their movements graceful and precise. "This is how we begin," Tauren explained. "We shape the saplings, guide their growth. It's a form of art for us, as much as it is a necessity." David watched as a Yorathi used his 4 hands to gently bend the growing wood, another following behind him, humming softly, a sound that seemed to encourage the tree to bend without breaking. "It's incredible," David said. "On Earth we build with dead material, wood, metal. But you build with life. It's a connection," Kayla added. "One that teaches us respect for the life around us." They spent the morning at the site, Tauren and others explaining their methods and philosophies. David was deeply impressed, not just by the technology, but by the harmony it represented between the Yorathi and their environment. As they returned to Kayla's home for a meal, David felt a profound sense of peace. "Thank you, Tauren, for sharing this with me. And Kayla, for everything." Tauren nodded. "It is our pleasure. We believe in sharing knowledge, in learning from each other. Perhaps there is something from your world, your experiences that you could share with us." David thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think there might be. Back on Earth, I'm an engineer. Maybe there's something from my field that could be interesting for you. Then we shall look forward to learning from you as well," Kayla said, her smile bright. As the day faded into evening, David realized he was no longer a stranger here. He was becoming part of something. And perhaps, he thought, that was exactly what he needed. Chapter 4. Learning and Understanding. David spent the following days immersing himself in the Yorathi culture, guided by Kayla and the ever-welcoming Tauren. The community, curious about the human among them, frequently invited him to participate in their daily activities, eager to exchange knowledge and experiences. One crisp morning, Tauren approached David as he was finishing a light breakfast prepared by Kayla. "David, I was thinking," Tauren began, his tone thoughtful. "Since you've shown such interest in our ways, perhaps you would like to join me today in the crafting hall. We are starting a new project, and your engineering skills might offer a new perspective." David was intrigued. "I'd love to, Tauren. What kind of project is it?" "We're designing a new gathering space," Tauren explained as they walked towards a large, dome-shaped building that resonated with the soft sounds of Yorathi tools and voices. "It's going to be the largest one yet, intended for celebrations and big community meetings." Inside the crafting hall, David was introduced to Silas, a master builder known for his innovative designs. Silas, with his vibrant purple skin and a sharp glint in his eyes, greeted David warmly. "Kayla tells me you're an engineer," Silas said, sizing David up with a friendly smirk. "We could use a fresh set of eyes on our structural integrity challenges." David smiled, feeling a surge of professional pride. "I'd be happy to help. What are you working on?" Silas laid out the plans on a large, flat table. The design was complex, incorporating elements that allowed the structure to breathe and grow along with the plant life it was built from. "Our main challenge is balancing the growth rate of the structure with its stability," Silas explained. "The building needs to support itself while still being flexible enough to integrate the growing trees." David studied the plans. "Have you considered using tension integrity, like a suspension bridge? It might give you the flexibility and strength you need." Silas's eyes lit up. "That's an interesting idea. Show me more of this concept." Together, they spent the morning reworking the plans, incorporating David's suggestions. The Yorathi builders around them listened intently, eager to learn from the human whose strange ideas might just solve one of their long-standing problems. As they worked, another builder, Miro, joined them. He was younger and incredibly enthusiastic about integrating new ideas into their constructions. "David, this suspension concept, could it work on smaller scales too? Like for housing?" Miro asked, sketching rapidly as he spoke. "Absolutely," David replied, explaining the principles of tension and load distribution as he had learned in his engineering courses back on Earth. The session turned into a collaborative workshop, with Yorathi and human learning from each other, blending techniques and ideas until the sun began to dip below the horizon. As they wrapped up, Torin clapped David on the back. "This has been a productive day. Thank you, David. Your insights have been invaluable." "It was my pleasure, really," David said, feeling a sense of accomplishment and integration that he hadn't felt since his arrival. "I'm learning just as much from you all." "That's the spirit of Yora," Kayla said, joining them as they left the hall. "Learning, sharing, growing together. You're becoming a part of this community, David." As they walked back to Kayla's home, David reflected on the day. He had not only contributed to a new community project, but had also found a new sense of belonging. The blending of Yorathi and human knowledge had created something unique, and David felt a deep satisfaction in being a part of it. The day had been long and fulfilling, and as he lay down to sleep that night, he realized that Yora was starting to feel like home. Chapter 5. The Festival of Stars. As the celestial alignment drew near, the atmosphere in Yora bristled with excitement and anticipation. The Festival of Stars was a celebrated event, occurring once every decade when two of the planet's moons aligned, casting ethereal lights across the landscape. Kayla had mentioned the festival to David several times, her eyes always lighting up at the prospect. "David, the festival is tomorrow night," Kayla reminded him as they walked through the village, helping with the preparations. "It's a sight like no other, and I think you'll find the experience quite enlightening." "I'm looking forward to it," David replied, genuinely excited to witness one of the most significant events in Yorathi culture. As the day of the festival arrived, Torin found David examining some of the intricate light structures being set up around the main plaza. "David, come with me. We're gathering a group to collect the glowing orchids from the northern field. They're essential for tonight's celebration," Torin explained. "Sounds interesting. What's special about these orchids?" David asked, following Torin towards a group of Yorathi equipped with large baskets. "They only bloom during the Festival of Stars. Their petals absorb the moonlight, and they glow throughout the night. They symbolize the light in darkness, very important for our heritage," Torin shared, leading the way through a lush pathway. Reaching the field, David was amazed by the sight. The orchids shimmered under the fading sunlight, their petals already beginning to emit a soft, pulsing glow. "Wow, they're beautiful," he murmured, kneeling to get a closer look. Each one is precious. We must gather them carefully, Miro, who had joined the expedition, instructed as he gently harvested the flowers. David carefully followed suit, finding a rhythm in the delicate work. The group talked and laughed, their voices mingling with the sounds of the rustling leaves and distant wildlife. As night fell, they returned to the village, baskets brimming with glowing orchids. The plaza was transformed into a spectacle of light and color, with the orchids placed around creating a mesmerizing effect. Kayla approached David, her own skin reflecting the soft lights. "You should wear these," she said, handing him a garland of glowing orchids. "Thank you, Kayla. You look incredible," David replied, noticing how the light played off her features. The festival began with a traditional dance, the Yorathi moving in sync to an ancient melody that seemed to resonate through the ground. David watched, captivated by the beauty and grace of the performance. As the dance concluded, Kayla took David's hand. "Come, let's walk." They strolled away from the crowd, the sounds of the celebration softening behind them. The path led to a small clearing, where the alignment of the moons cast a breathtaking light show above them. "It's beautiful," David said, looking up at the sky, then at Kayla. "It's said that during this festival, the light from our moons brings clarity and truth," Kayla shared, her eyes locked on his. "Is that so?" David smiled, stepping closer. The moment felt right, suspended in time under the celestial lights. Kayla nodded, leaning in. Their first kiss was gentle, a soft touch that spoke of the weeks of growing affection and connection. As they parted, the world seemed to glow brighter around them. "I think I'm beginning to understand that clarity," David whispered, his hand caressing her face. Kayla smiled, her hand covering his. "As am I." They returned to the festival, hand in hand, their hearts light and spirits high. The night carried on with laughter and music, but for David, the world had narrowed down to the radiant figure beside him, her presence more intoxicating than the glowing lights of the orchids. As the festival drew to a close, David knew that this night under the Yorathi stars would be one he'd never forget. Chapter 6. Unseen Dangers. In the early hours of morning, the forest was quiet but far from still. Its towering trees swayed slightly under an unfelt breeze, their glowing leaves casting faint light over the ground. David and Kayla were walking a narrow trail that wound through one of the less familiar parts of the woodland. "Are you sure this is the right path?" David asked, glancing over at Kayla, who was scanning the area with her 4 hands occupied, 2 adjusting a piece of Yorathi tracking equipment, the other 2 gently brushing aside branches. "Positive," she replied. "Torin said there have been strange disturbances in this sector. We need to find out what's causing them." "What kind of disturbances?" David frowned, stepping over a gnarled root that snaked across the trail. "Something has been damaging the young growth," Kayla explained. "The saplings we guide into structures have been found uprooted or slashed, and there have been odd noises at night." "That doesn't sound too friendly," David muttered, pulling his jacket tighter as the air grew cooler. Kayla glanced back, a faint smile on her lips. "Stay close. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." They moved deeper into the forest, their surroundings shifting from familiar vibrant greens to darker hues. David kept close, his eyes darting between the shadows. The stillness of the environment only heightened his awareness of their own movements, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the occasional rustle of foliage as they passed. Kayla paused, her head tilting slightly. "Do you hear that?" David stopped, holding his breath. At first, there was nothing. Then, a faint clicking noise, almost rhythmic, seemed to echo from somewhere ahead. "That doesn't sound like any animal I've heard out here," Kayla said quietly. Her hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting the tracking device to narrow in on the source. David pulled out a small scanning tool he had salvaged from the crash. "It's faint, but I'm getting some readings," he said, glancing at the screen. "Whatever it is, it's big." Kayla nodded. "We'll approach carefully." They moved forward, the clicking growing louder. Soon, the path opened into a small clearing. In the center stood a massive creature, unlike anything David had encountered on this planet before. It was roughly the size of a small truck, its body covered in a shell-like armor that shimmered faintly under the bioluminescent light. Multiple legs supported its bulk, each tipped with clawed appendages that dug into the soil. The creature was hunched over a young sapling, its claws scraping against the trunk as if testing its strength. David's stomach tightened at the sight. "It's been attacking the trees." Kayla reached out, gently placing a hand on David's arm. "Stay still. It hasn't noticed us yet." But the moment she spoke, the creature's head snapped up, its small, glinting eyes locking onto them. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the clearing. "Never mind," Kayla muttered. "We need to retreat." As they stepped back, the creature let out a sharp, shrieking sound and charged. David instinctively grabbed a fallen branch, raising it as if it were a club, but Kayla was already moving. She leapt forward, her agile form a blur as she sidestepped the creature's charge. In one swift motion, she struck the creature's side with a piece of Yorathy-crafted gear that emitted a sharp burst of light. The creature recoiled, emitting a high-pitched screech, and stumbled back. "David, over here," Kayla called, motioning him towards a cluster of thicker trees. He followed quickly, his heart pounding as the creature's cries echoed behind them. Once behind the cover of the dense trunks, Kayla turned back, her 4 hands moving quickly to activate another device. A high-frequency sound pulsed from it, causing the creature to pause and shake its head, disoriented. "It can't stand certain frequencies," Kayla explained. "This should buy us enough time." "Enough time for what?" David asked, catching his breath. "To get to higher ground and signal Tauren," she said. "We need the others to help track its movements and figure out why it's here." David nodded, gripping the branch he still held. "Let's move." They scrambled up a nearby ridge, the creature's frustrated growls fading behind them. Once at the top, Kayla activated a communicator and relayed their findings to Tauren. Within minutes, a group of Yorathy arrived, armed with equipment similar to Kayla's, and began driving the creature back into the deeper forest. As the situation settled, Kayla turned to David, her expression both relieved and amused. "You did well, David. I saw the way you held that branch like it was your most trusted tool." David chuckled, lowering the makeshift weapon. "Hey, I didn't exactly have time to grab anything better." Kayla smiled, the tension easing from her features. "I'm glad you were here. You handled yourself well under pressure." "So did you." "I'd say we make a pretty good team," David replied, his grin returning. As they began the trek back to the village, the danger behind them, David couldn't help but feel a growing appreciation for the Yorathy and their way of life. Though he was far from home, he was starting to find his place among these remarkable beings. Chapter 7. Crossroads. The sun cast long shadows over the forest as David sat at the edge of the village's main clearing, fidgeting with a small piece of Yorathy craftsmanship. It was a carved token, no bigger than a coin, that Kayla had given him to mark the day's festival, a reminder of their shared moment under the starlit sky. But now, the serenity of that evening felt like a distant memory. Kayla approached from the communal workshops, her 4 arms occupied with various tools and supplies. Spotting David, she adjusted her pace and stopped beside him, crouching to meet his gaze. "David," she began, her voice gentle, "you've been quiet all morning. Is something troubling you?" David looked up at her, holding the token between his fingers. "I've been thinking about What comes next? For me, I mean. Kayla's expression softened, and she set her tools aside. You mean going back to your people? He nodded. I came here on a mission. My ship wasn't just some solo exploration. It was part of a larger plan. If I don't return, Earth will never know what happened to me or what I found here. Kayla sat down beside him, her larger frame somehow not making him feel small but comforted. I understand, she said quietly. Your people must be worried. But I will miss you if you leave. David's chest tightened. It's not that I want to leave. I've never felt more connected to a place, or a person. You've shown me so much, Kayla. You've shown me what a life here could be like. Kayla reached out, placing one of her hands gently on his shoulder. You have given much to us as well. Your knowledge, your spirit, your presence here have been a gift. But I don't want you to feel trapped. You must choose freely. He took a deep breath, letting the weight of her words settle. What if I stayed? What if I found a way to bridge the gap between my world and yours? Her eyes lit up, hope flickering in their luminous depths. You would stay. David nodded slowly. If it means being with you, learning from you, and helping to build something new here, then yes. I think I could stay. Kayla's smile grew, and she placed her other hand over his, holding the token he still clutched. You are always welcome here, David. My people will accept you as one of our own. Thank you, he said, his voice steady now. But I'll need to send some kind of message back. Let Earth know I'm alive and what I've found. They may not understand, but at least they'll know. Kayla tilted her head thoughtfully. We can help. Our technology might be able to amplify a signal strong enough to reach your planet. It will not be easy, but it is possible. David felt a surge of relief. That would mean everything to me. Thank you. They sat together in the quiet clearing, the token still in David's hand, as he began to envision a future he had never considered before. A future where two worlds could be linked not by conflict, but by trust and understanding. A future where he and Kayla could share more than just moments under the stars. Chapter 8. Starbound Promise. David stood at the crash site as twilight began to settle over the forest. The ship's remains, now half covered in moss and flowering vines, were barely recognizable. Kayla and Torin had arrived earlier, bringing with them several other Yorathi engineers and scientists who were fascinated by the Earth technology David had salvaged. The group worked methodically, using Yorathi tools that pulsed with soft blue light as they pieced together what remained of the communication array. Kayla approached David, her four hands busy adjusting a sleek Yorathi device that looked like a crystalline sphere. We're almost ready. Torin and Ivar have fine-tuned the amplifier. We'll need your input to complete the frequency calibration. David smiled. I never imagined I'd be working alongside alien engineers to send a message back home. This is surreal. Kayla's lips curled into a warm grin. We never imagined helping a human contact his people. Life takes unexpected turns. Torin called out from behind the ship's skeletal frame. David, can you come here a moment? We've hit a snag with the power coupling. David jogged over, ducking under a bent support beam. Torin pointed to a charred component. This section won't hold if we power the array at full capacity. I can reinforce it with a regenerative filament, but it might not last long. David knelt beside Torin, examining the component. If we adjust the current flow, it'll reduce the load. It won't be as strong, but it should be stable enough to get the signal through. Torin nodded. Good thinking. I'll make the adjustments. As Torin worked, Kayla joined them, crouching next to David. Your knowledge has been invaluable here. Without you, we wouldn't have known how to align this old Earth equipment with our own systems. And without your technology, I'd have no chance of reaching home, David replied. This is a team effort. Kayla placed one of her hands on his shoulder. More than a team effort, David. You've become a part of our community. My community. David met her gaze, feeling a warmth that wasn't just from the evening air. And you've become part of my life, Kayla. A brief silence hung between them, comfortable yet charged. Then Ivar called out from across the clearing. It's ready. Kayla rose first, extending a hand to David. Let's see if this works. The assembled group gathered around the makeshift communication array, a strange fusion of Earth's rugged technology and the Yorathi's elegant, glowing tools. The array emitted a low hum as Tauren powered it up. Frequency alignment is set, Kayla reported, adjusting the crystalline sphere she held. David stepped forward, his heart pounding. I'll send the message now. He toggled the last switch, and the array flared with light. A holographic interface appeared, and David quickly typed out a short message. This is David Markham of the Odyssey. I'm alive. My ship crashed on an uncharted planet, and I've been taken in by the Yorathi people. I have learned much from them and hope to share our knowledge with Earth. I will not be returning, but know that I am well and that a new future is possible here. When he hit send, the array pulsed once more, then fell silent. The team waited in tense anticipation. A few moments passed, and a small, steady green light began blinking on the array's console. Tauren smiled. Signal confirmed. It's on its way. David exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It worked. Kayla turned to him, her luminous eyes reflecting the soft light of the array. You've done it, David. They'll know you're safe. He nodded, feeling a wave of relief. But as he looked at Kayla, he realized that the true message had already been sent, not to Earth, but to himself. He had chosen to stay, to live among the Yorathi, and to embrace the life he had built here. As the group began to pack up, Kayla and David lingered near the ship's remains. The night sky was clear, the stars shining brighter than ever. David reached for Kayla's hand, and she clasped his, her grip firm and comforting. I'm not looking back, David said quietly. This is my home now. Kayla smiled, and together they walked away from the wreckage, leaving the past behind and stepping into a future shaped by trust, cooperation, and a connection that crossed the boundaries of two worlds.